friends, welcome to the Play Extra channel. My name is John. On this channel, we talk all things physical media, so movies, music, and books. If you're into that kind of thing, go ahead and subscribe down below for more of that kind of content. Well, friends, this is episode number 9 of the 5. I can't believe we are one away from hitting 10, and I'm really excited about this episode. This is with my friend Nathan Jones. If you're not familiar with his channel, you need to check it. In the description down below will be a link to his channel, and you've got to go check out his content. It's amazing stuff. I've been watching his YouTube channel for quite some time now, and I'm so thrilled that I got a chance to actually sit down and have a conversation with him about film. He has such an incredible wealth of knowledge on film, and I love watching his channel because I learned so much about all these films I had no idea about. So this conversation, we got to talk through all the questions I ask on any episode of the 5. In these episodes, what I do is I ask 5 questions, and each person who comes onto an episode answers with 5 films. And the purpose is to get to talk movies with friends. Second is to get to know these YouTubers a little more, these film collectors. And thirdly, we get 25 film recommendations, which is pretty awesome. So anyway, I am really excited about this conversation. It was a great conversation. I so enjoyed it, and ended up with a huge list of films I need to check out now. So anyway, friends, so glad that you're here. Thank you so much for checking out this episode. I hope you enjoy it. It's episode number 9 of the 5 with my friend Nathan Jones.
Hi, you've reached Nathan. I'm not here right now, but if you can, please answer these 3 questions first. Tell me first your name, second your quest, and third your favorite color. Honestly, I want a marmalade sandwich right now. We're talking about this.
Your jokes are like saying, "Hey, come follow me for a second," and then you take someone on a 2-mile walk and you go, "Hey, look, there's a pile of dog crap."
But I love it.
Thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Taking some time on the weekend.
Yeah, of course. I'm very thrilled to be here, and I'm glad that you're doing this amazing series, and I think this is awesome because more and more interactions I see out loud outside of this, like Daisuke really, him. Daisuke yeah. Daisuke really kind of gave me my idea for a film journey to an extent. I was kind of coming up with it as I was talking to a few friends. But I just remembered like when that all started, I'm like, I'm not trying to I didn't want to step on Daisuke's toes or anything. I didn't want to, but I just having more and more people talk to each other, I just think is just so beneficial. And obviously here we are a couple years, later since he kind of did that. And I did something like a year ago, and seeing all these different things pop up and with their own spins and everything that they're doing that's unique to them, and I think that's really cool. So yeah, I'm happy that you're doing this series.
Cool, man. Well, for me it was because I've been watching your stuff for a really long time. I've been watching Stephanie at Movie Chatter, Joe and Marie, Rick at Found Movie, all these people I'm watching, and I enjoy it and I love it, and I learn a ton about the films they're showing when they're unpacking stuff or just showing what they've hauled and all of that. But after about a year and a half, I was like, I would love to have a conversation with these people. I wish I lived in the same town with all of these people so I could go grab coffee and just talk music or movies with these folks. And I do love lists. I love top 5, top 10 lists. And so I started working on this and thinking, if I crafted these questions in a certain way, I think we'll be able to get to see the person behind the videos, and which I see obviously in your film journey series and some of the other ones I'm watching. And that's what interests me, is I'd like to see it a little deeper. And so that's why I enjoy it. I was going through all your content and your video series that you do. And I love the film journey series very much. I love the 100 Years series of films. My favorites are 20s through the 50s is my favorite. So I love watching you guys just pull. And I was writing down notes and stuff for that. And you also do a ton of Criterion stuff, which I'm newer to, in the last year and a half.
Yeah, I have a problem. Yes.
I see that. I fully support your problem because I get so much from watching you do these videos. So I enjoy it so much, and I wanted to get to know these people who I've been watching for 2.5 years because I find their stuff compelling and thoughtful. So anyway, that's one of the reasons I reached out to you. I just think you do such a great job with the content you put out, but your stuff isn't just like, here's this movie, here's this movie. You do really thoughtful content. And so I thought, man, it'd be really fun to, actually have a conversation with Nathan and to learn a little bit more about him and kind of where he's from and what he's watching and why he watches it. So.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, like I think I've said countless times with multiple people, I'm very, very thankful that we're all in this space, because I feel like a lot of us, are just kind of, we're on our, it's weird because obviously we're talking about movies and most of the time we're watching them either by ourselves or with our families, some friends, but it's not like a huge, like you're not watching these things with a billion people, but luckily we're all able to connect because it's all very, like we're on our own islands. But I feel like with a space like this, we're able to share that island space and kind of just, gush over the things that we enjoy. And I don't know. I think it's very. I'm glad that I started a few years ago, and it's how it's evolved. And I think, I would have to echo what you're saying. So thank you.
But my wife, she was teasing me last week because I was filming another one of these conversations with someone, and I said, "Oh, I got to go to my office," and I'm talking with whoever it was that was talking to, and she's like, "Who's that?" And I was like, because in my mind, I'm like, it's a part of my world. It's obviously not what I do full time,
right?
But it's in my world. Like there's Nathan, there's Joe, Marie, there's all these people, and they're not part of her world at all. And so she just laughed. She goes, "Oh yeah, you and your internet friends." And I was like, "Yeah, me and my internet friends."
Yeah, pretty much. Person, yeah, well, I mean, once COVID kind of dies down, I definitely would love to travel, because I know I talked to Steph many times about just heading out to Jersey or wherever she ever ends up if she moves out of there. But I would love to, go to the East Coast and meet up with you and just we honestly can just all meet in a spot and just hang out for like a week or whatever.
That'd be super fun. Yeah.
Yeah. If we all got time off and stuff, because Jesus Christ, I work way too much.
I know, man. With this year, our daughter just went into first grade, and so it's for the first time she has a schedule in life. She never had a schedule before.
That's overwhelming.
It is, because I was like, "Hey, we should go back to New York in the next couple of months and spend a week there." And then it hit me. I was like, I can't. She has a life now, and so yeah, it is a totally new chapter for us.
I'm just knowing all that stuff. Like I was very free flowing, even in school. Like, I had school and I had time to set aside for homework, and I even worked in high school and all the way up. But I always had kind of, things kind of set out in my head, but like life's gotten so complicated now that I rely so much on my phone calendar.
Yeah.
and I have because I work 2 jobs right now. And one of the jobs I actually just got promoted, but through that, like I have that work computer, which is not this one. Like I have a work computer and that's set to like my Outlook there, and that Outlook is connected to other things. And I'm like, and this is all like waving so much responsibility. It's like, geez, like and then like just trying to set aside time to figure out things is, sure. And I'm by myself. I'm single, so like I don't have a family. So I mean, yes, I'm preaching to people who are like, I've been doing this for years, but it's definitely like hard, especially stuff that we like to do. We like to watch movies. Like we have to set aside time for that.
Yeah.
So it's hard, but life is life, and I'm glad to be living it though. So.
Yeah, me too. For movie watching for us, because my daughter's so young, like unless I'm watching a Disney movie, a G-rated thing, like it's Disney. It's not happening. It's not happening until 9:00 at night, and at the end of a long day, there's a decent chance I'm not making it 2 hours.
I'm gonna crash too. Yeah. I go to bed at like 10:30 usually.
Okay. I try, man, to make it through to like a midnight to watch something, but knowing that I'm up in a few hours after that, yeah, it can be tough. But anyway, well, cool, man. Well, I do appreciate you doing this, and but I did have a non-movie question for you. I know you're a Pacers guy.
Oh yeah.
So I'm a Celtics guy, and I think we can.
Sweet, I like the Celtics.
Celtics are, I think, the greatest.
Larry Bird, both of us.
I was going to say, Larry Bird, Coach of the Year, Executive of the Year for the Pacers. So anyway, I have my dream starting 5 for the Pacers, and I wanted to run it by you and see what if there are any changes you would make in that lineup. So, all right, starting five with Pacers. I got a point guard. I got Victor Oladipo for a starting point. In my opinion, the greatest Pacer of all time, and Reggie Miller at shooting guard. And I love the T-shirt you have and you wear in your video sometimes. Mm-hmm. I do have Paul George at small forward. I know he's a shooting guard, but I thought I could bump him up. I think he'd do fine. He's tall enough in the small forward spot. He's a little bit small, but I got Ron Artest at power forward.
World peace.
Meta world peace. I was like, he's tough. We need defense, and especially at his peak there when he was at his best. He's a solid guy. And then the center is a tough one for me because I feel like the guy I'm going to choose is better probably statistically at his peak, but my heart says somebody else. But I'm going to choose Jermaine O'Neal for my center. But my heart, and I'll put him at the sixth man.
I have a feeling I know.
Rick Smits is who I want.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
So I got Rick Smits is who I want at my five. But I'll put Jermaine O'Neal in there and coach by Larry Bird. So anyway. I'm
about it. I like it.
All right.
Now, I guess I didn't watch the Paul George era. And I also, when I was watching basketball in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was really more focused in the late 90s. I was focusing on that last Chicago Bulls run with my dad.
Yeah.
But right when I was kind of exiting basketball, I was watching AI, I was watching Kobe and all that stuff. So I haven't been a Pacers fan. This is, I guess, almost my second year of being a Pacers fan. So I have a lot of background knowledge and looking up these things, like watching Malice at the Palace, looking at, the Artest and Jermaine O'Neal era, end of Reggie Miller's era, seeing that 2000s finals versus the Lakers. I watched all of that. It's cool to just kind of going back and seeing that. So I agree with those picks. I think the only person I might, I obviously, barring injury, because I think injury got two of those guys, Oladipo and Paul George.
Yeah.
I like Sabonis right now, and honestly, okay. I feel like he could bully himself into the paint, just depending. But I don't know. Obviously, like I said, I only really know the current guys a lot more than I know, the former guys. But watching Smits, and Reggie Miller and all those guys, and why am I blanking right now? Mark Jackson.
Oh yeah.
And also who was 4 and 5 down in the paint.
Danny Granger played for them for a while.
Granger, but it's I'm talking about he bullied the Davises. Both of them. Yeah. Both Davises were incredible to the team too. Amazing. So yeah, but I like it.
Chris Mullin, I also considered having him, but he was kind of in the back end of his career with the Pacers.
You're right.
But if he's in his prime, he probably makes this list for me.
That's a good list, and honestly, I'm excited for this next season. So even though it's going to be tough because the East looks a lot stronger.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. It's the most interesting. I think it's more interesting than the West for sure.
Yeah, because the West, I mean, Brooklyn and LA are just so stacked. And LA got Rondo, who's my Celtics. He's one of my top 5. So he's my favorite point guard for the Celtics. So he's back there again for the second time. So if he gets a ring, I'll be totally happy for that. But
Rondo jumps around, especially this last part of his.
Yeah.
Was he with Atlanta before that?
Very briefly.
Yeah. Right.
Real quick stint in Dallas. He quit mid-game in Dallas. So he's got a ton of attitude. Did well with Sacramento for a little bit. But I love him. He was good for us.
It'll be interesting to see the Celtics. I think Celtics and both Pacers both are kind of in this weird spot where we have most of the same guys that we had in both of our teams. I know you had some bigger moves, I think, than we did. Necessarily, especially, we both of our coaches changed. Yeah. So that's big. And so I'm very happy that Rick Carlisle's back for us. So that's a good move. So I but I'm who's the coach of the Celtics now that
I don't
what's
remember.
his name went up?
I don't remember his name because
Is
that
Brad
just happened.
did
It's
Brad
Brad.
become the general manager
Yeah, he's now head operations.
at operations?
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so, which we'll see. I don't know if he's cut out for the NBA or if he's just an amazing college coach. So he did great, but I think with the talent he had over these last whatever 7 years, I mean, it's hard not to do okay with that kind of talent. But
Right.
so, but anyway, I'm glad he's been there. I do like him.
Yeah,
So
I follow Marcus Smart a lot, so I like
yeah,
him. Yeah, yeah.
he's our tough guy.
hmm
But
He'll get in your face.
I love Tatum. Tatum's my guy. Brown is great. I don't think they should ever. He's always in trade talks. I think we should always keep him, but it'll be an interesting season.
Yeah, it definitely will be, and I think the East is going to be really competitive. Seeing how Chicago and the Knicks have been making all these moves, and
Yeah.
like they're going to be tough. So,
Yeah.
Yep, we'll see where we land, but I have a feeling that our teams are in that 5 through 10 for sure.
Yeah.
Like it's just that's the hard part is like where are we at in those spots. So and we'll see how the season goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Injuries will determine a lot of that, and probably COVID
Yeah.
again this year. So
Good God, injuries. Don't remind me.
Well, your
And-
career has been, yeah, like you've had such talent go down with injuries.
Yeah, we have the injury bug forever. Paul George, Oladipo, like this last year with COVID and the year before that, like, I mean, when we got LeVert, like he had cancer.
I know.
So,
Yeah.
and you know, I mean, I'm glad because I honestly think LeVert is a great trade. I think we did really, really well with that. But TJ Warren's been out, and he's still going to be out for the first quarter of the season. So we're not even going to have our starter five. We didn't have our starting five the entire last season. We're not going to have it starting off, and that just kind of frustrates me because I'm like we can't just keep relying on Turner, who also is injury prone, Brogdon injury prone, and Sabonis, who's pretty much holding everything together. So, but anyway,
Dang. Good. Well, this is the first time in the 5 where we've had an NBA conversation. So this is great.
glad to be with that.
All right, man. Well, let me dive into the 5 questions. And thanks again for doing it. So the purpose behind it is to talk movies with my friends, which I'm excited to do, to learn more about you. And then also anyone watching this gets 25 film recommendations, and so do I. And I've got my phone to take notes. So anyway, I am looking forward to hearing your picks, man. So first question, what 5 films have you most recently seen?
Yeah, so I actually have 5 right here. So the first one is actually a documentary that came out in 2011, and it just recently this year got the Blu-ray update on this. And I'm actually talking about Mark Cousins' The Story of Film right here, and I've brought this up on my channel before because I was watching it. I literally just finished it all, but it is, let's see, how long is it? It is 915 minutes. So it is a very long documentary. It's broken down into episodes, kind of setting the scene of maybe the early days of cinema, so like the 1890s, all the way up to now. And so Mark Cousins is an Irish filmmaker, and he narrates over this. And I would recommend subtitles if you're not used to listening to his kind of pace of how he's speaking. But I don't know, I quite enjoy it, and I just was able to see world cinema from all talks about things that are big in Hollywood and big around the world, and it just breaks down and goes to different parts of the world and throughout all these different decades, and it's an incredible journey. And I actually just it's off screen, but I actually have his book that he has that's connected to this. I think he wrote the book first before he made the documentary. But I have the most recent revised edition, I think that came out last year in 2020, which has some new stuff attached to it. But it's an incredible journey. And if you want, this is actually an all-region disc. But I got this from the UK. So if anyone who's watching this, Network is the company that puts this out. And I highly recommend checking out their website. There's a few things on their site that are really, really great. But yeah, Mark Cousins, The Story of Film, An Odyssey, incredible stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's on my list.
Yeah, but it's a worthwhile adventure especially if you like movies, So next, I have two Criterions that I've been watching. I need to save some space because November is coming up, and I need to buy some stuff then. But these are two releases that came out this year from the collection. The first one is Nightmare Alley, which I am very excited for Del Toro and his new adaptation that's coming out, I think, later this year. The trailer is out. But Nightmare Alley is an incredible noir from 1947, directed by Edmund Goulding, can't talk, and starring Tyrone Power and Joan Blondell. This is unlike any kind of noir that I've ever seen. If anyone has seen noirs, like I have Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall right here, so noirs are obviously usually dark, gritty, a little bit pessimistic, looking at kind of just, all of this bright and shiny Hollywood stuff and like looking at the back alleys and using shadows and stuff like that. But this one is that, but also kind of the backdrop is like a carnival for a lot of the story. And it's about a con man and his life as he goes through different people that he meets and, being used. And there's some, obviously with, you have him, there's a hangman right here. So there's some cards right here, some tarot cards that come with this set, which are really, really cool. And so it's just kind of like a mystic, and everyone can think of Big if they're, having that Tom Hanks memory of, meeting Zoltan and stuff. But it's stuff like that, which is really, really cool. But I would recommend it. So it's a really fun noir. Have you seen this one?
I have not.
I think you would really like it.
I think I've watched maybe 4 or 5 videos on that film though. So yeah, it is one I do need to check out.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Like I said, fun, it might be not the adjective I would use for a noir, but it's exciting, right? Next is 2003 film. It's his second film, I think. It's by South Korean director Bong Joon-ho. I finally watched Memories of Murder. I finally got on the train with everybody else who are recently seeing this for the first time. But this is an incredible mystery thriller film about a serial killer in this really small village in South Korea, about a real serial killer that actually was killing young girls, but like getting away with it, and not really knowing like when the victim or when the perpetrator would commit these crimes. And so it's more or less these detectives who are really kind of just blumbering through this whole thing and then trying to figure out what's going on. So this is, I guess, if I would put a movie that's like akin to this in the U.S., I would say Zodiac is a lot like this in a sense, but this came out a few years before that. But yeah, it's a really, really great film. Has a very, very memorable ending, which I won't say anything for people who haven't seen it, but it is quite the release, and I'm very happy that that is out. Have you seen this one?
I have not.
I think you would quite enjoy it. It's actually, it's got some funny parts too. So not just all murder and mystery. So next is the next 2 films are the schlocky ones, because I'm starting to get into October, and I'm starting to get a few things out of the way before I get to like my horror films, right? So the one of the films I watched for the first time is David Cronenberg's Crash. And this movie is, to best describe it, it is sex and cars. Those two combination. It's an NC-17 film, so it's definitely like, it's a film that is very, not family friendly. So just a warning to everybody. This came out in 1996. And yeah, no, this release, have you watched any of David Cronenberg's work, like The Fly?
No.
I think The Fly is probably his most famous thing with Jeff Goldblum in the 80s. But yeah, David Cronenberg is definitely a very interesting director. He's done some like Viggo Mortensen films in like the 2000s, Eastern Promises and A History of Violence, which are some really great kind of thrillers. But he's all over the map. But this one has, a few people like, let's see, why can't Holly Hunter and James Spader are like kind of the two big people from the 90s in this film. But it's a weird one. It's really hard to describe and hard to sell to people because you have to be in the right mindset to watch it, I feel like. And I think a few years ago, I probably wouldn't watch this and enjoy it. But now that I've watched a few other films and I've gotten older, I feel like I can appreciate it more, even though it's not something I'm going to put on all the time because this is a really weird movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's an Arrow Films release.
Yes, this is an Arrow 4K. I don't have very many of their films, but yeah, this is I think this is an all regions thing because you can get Arrow in the US, but there's also Arrow in the UK. I think I got this from the UK though. So, but anyway, and then the next one is my other schlocky film, a Canadian Canucksploitation is what I think my good friend Aaron Penn would call it. I have a Vinegar Syndrome title. I don't have very many Vinegar Syndrome releases, mainly because it's not necessarily my cup of tea of a boutique label, but there are a few things that I've been recommended from some friends that I think they were like, yeah, you're going to enjoy this one. And so I'm like, okay, yeah. So I watched Sudden Fury, and this is a 1975 like a B and C movie. It's almost like a C movie. It's definitely shot in this weird way, but yeah, it's just a revenge. It's like a revenge tale of a husband who is trying to exploit his wife, and the only way he can do it really is to kill her somehow. But he's on the road, and so he gets in this car accident, and from there, like somebody witnesses it and tries to. You see that they've met a little bit previous down the road, and more or less hijinks ensue. And there's actually a lot of really interesting twists and turns and really creative kind of just thriller of sorts. So I think all the things that I've mentioned are like thrillers in some kind of way, except for the documentary. So I guess I'm in that mood right now.
Well, cool. So what 5 films do you have your earliest memories from?
Yeah. So the first film that I'll mention is one where it was like the original house that I lived in. And I would say it was when I was 4 or 5 years old that I have this memory, but it is of the 1940 Disney film Fantasia.
Oh, nice.
And it's the last segment on the first Fantasia film, and it is the night on Bald Mountain, like the most terrifying one of the bunch. I think Stravinsky's score is playing over it, and or Wagner or something very ominous and like encroaching, and it's about this demon and all his ghouls taking over this town. And then near the end of the song in the segment, obviously light conquers the darkness, which is really great. But I remember watching this as a kid and just being terrified of this thing, because you have that music and film kind of combination of the two that really kind of just played on my emotions. And so but now, ever since then, this has become, over time, my favorite Disney film, actually.
Wow.
So, especially animated, because I love music so much, and I also love films, and so it just it marriages the two very, very well. And this is actually the double pack right here with Fantasia 2000. I think I got this on Amazon years ago, but it looks like this might be like a UK thing, but it's all regions, wherever. I don't know. I haven't looked, obviously, because I have it, but I hope it's available on home disc for people. But if you haven't, if you have Disney Plus, check out both of these Fantasias, because they're so much fun. And if you like music, classical music, and animation, then you're going to have a blast.
Nice. Those are great.
Next, when I was probably I'm trying to remember, this came out in 1999, so I was 7 years old when this happened, showing my age, everyone. But Tarzan came out, and I remember watching this with my cousins. And I had not been introduced to Phil Collins or Genesis or any of that awesome music. I want to say I listened to some of that with my dad, because I grew up on classic rock, but I wasn't ready for, once again, music and animation here. This film that I think just blew it out of the park. And I just remember after the fact going to, I think either Kmart at the time, maybe, that it was still around. I think we went and got the soundtrack for this movie. And I also remember going to McDonald's because McDonald's had the toys, right? And the toys were connected to the film itself. And so I just have, some photographic memories of me watching this movie with my cousins and just, singing the Phil Collins songs. And, it's just like there's so much heart in this movie, and so I don't know. Tarzan, it would be another a good early memory, less scary than Fantasia. Let's just say that.
It's funny. I'm finding it so interesting. Obviously, there's just like a huge body of film out there, but to hear like when there is when I have these conversations mention the same film, and you're the second person to have mentioned Tarzan. Austin St. Pierre mentioned it, and it's funny. The big thing for him was what you're saying. He said, he still to this day has the soundtrack in his car, and coming home from work, he's like listens to it all the time, and it's his so favorite good. Animated film. And the music is part of the biggest reason.
Yeah, I mean, if I know I said Fantasia is probably my favorite Disney movie, that's a close second. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's all music related, and I think I remember seeing the meme a couple years ago where it was saying something along the lines of Disney offering Phil Collins to do this movie, and it's like he didn't have to go that hard, but he did for us, and so it's like I love that.
That's great. Yeah, he caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting him to say that he still rocks that soundtrack all the time.
I mean, it's hard not to quit. I mean, Phil Collins is still great. I'm sure everyone who's watching this still air drums to "In the Air Tonight."
Oh yeah.
Anytime you hear that song, right? So I mean, you can't quit that.
That's true.
Yeah. From there, though, another early movie theater experience, same year, is this where there was so much hype for this, and I was a kid, so I didn't get the backlash that everyone did at the time, but people could probably see where I'm going with this. But Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, this is, I think, from Episode 2 right here, but this is just the prequel trilogy that I have in my hands. But from 1999, The Phantom Menace, everyone was just so hyped. I remember vague parts of that because I definitely had the VHS copies that my dad had, and I watched those prior to watching Episode 1. And I was just very excited because I'm like, okay, I'm into Star Wars. I like it a lot. But I remember watching that, enjoying so much about it. Once again, I think toys and kind of the merchandising attached to like fast food places. I think KFC actually had these really cool cup holders, had maybe the heads of each of the characters from Episode 1 on top of the cup that you can collect. And I remember collecting those. I remember, I think not too long after I watched the movie, that I went to Walmart and got Darth Maul's lightsaber. And I was always huge into swords and any kind of saber fights or fencing. I even did kendo as a kid. I always loved that stuff. And so just seeing that duel between Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Darth Maul it blew me away. And so, yeah, Episode 1 definitely kind of cemented my love of Star Wars, even though I had seen, like I said, the original films prior to it. And now, obviously, since then, realizing that those movies are way better than Episode 1, but I still love the franchise nonetheless. And, now I think recently, I didn't talk about in my recent watches, but I've been watching those Vision, Star Wars Vision stories on Disney Plus, which are incredible. And I highly recommend those too, if anyone is a Star Wars fan, and then also just seeing animation.
Nice.
And the next movie I don't have on me, and I plan to fix this sometime soon. But it is another memory of, so I told everyone just now that I was scared of The Night on Bald Mountain. But the movie that I think maybe switched my brain onto not being scared of scary movies. I was initially scared by this movie, by the way. But it terrified me. I just didn't want to watch scary movies. But it is 2001's Jeepers Creepers. And I remember watching it over at my neighbor's house and going over and watching it with him, and I'm just like, nope, nope, nope. Like I hid behind the couch. I remember hiding behind the couch and being like, this is not something I want to watch right now. Like this is terrifying to me. I mean, this is around the same time, a few years later after that. I mean, watching something like Signs from M. Night Shyamalan was another film where, the birthday party scene, that's a really good scene that everyone remembers, where just that found footage just scared the hell out of me. And I just couldn't, around that time period, I just remember some of those movies really affecting me. And, but I was still curious. Like I would still watch it and sit through as kids and teenagers would do, is they would go through. It's like, you know what, like, I know this is going to scare me, but I'm going to do it anyway. And that's kind of where I got my toes wet, and I eventually fell in love with horror. And now hardly anything scares me movie-wise, because I obviously know those are fictional worlds, but there are a few things that still get me. Not Jeepers Creepers, though. Not anymore. So.
Nice.
And then the last film that I have here is one that actually is going to cross over into maybe the next question.
Okay.
So I'll just start with the first one. But if anyone who knows me knows that these films have had like the greatest impact in my life, and I have just had such good early memories with it. Talking about the Lord of the Rings movies, and I have right here the extended edition DVD box set. The Blu-rays are right there. The 4Ks are right there. Like I have them all in all these different editions. I used to have the VHS of the Fellowship of the Ring. I don't have that anymore because VHSs were about to go out around that time period. But this is certainly the film. I watched all these movies in theaters. I watched, I think, the last two in IMAX when they came out. With my uncle, who was he grew up in, the 70s, and I grew up reading The Hobbits and the Lord of the Rings books, and he was in the 80s, he was a big D&D guy, so like he played D&D with his friends, and so he was always into fantasy. And so I was sitting next to him. I remember when we were watching, I think, Return of the King, and I remember when it was the last ride of the Rohirrim, on the Pelennor Fields, when they're fighting in Gondor, the armies of Mordor, and Theoden does his last charge, and my uncle just crying. In fact, wow. I'm just thinking about it right now. I'm tearing up. But like and I at that time, this is 2003 roughly, because this is Return of the King that I'm talking about. I'm just like a teenager at that point. And I don't have any emotions really connected like that. But now, as I'm older, I almost teared up just now just talking about it. I tear up on everything now. But I just remember that memory is really just stuck with me, and has carried it ever since. Not just his love of that, but like I just fell in love with it because I just love this world, and gobbled up Tolkien things, and now I am a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Always have been, and forever will champion these films.
Yeah, I had a friend who is about probably 15, 20 years older than I am, and he told me when he went to theater and saw the Fellowship of the Ring that he just instantly began crying when they're in the Shire, because it's everything he dreamed it was when he read those books dozens of times. And all that had consumed his imagination as a kid, all of a sudden was in front of him. And he goes, the only thing I could do was just weep in front of the screen. And I was like, well, that is so cool. What a neat experience to have.
Yeah, I'm envious of that.
Oh, yeah.
Because, it's like how you live in such a different world where, you wouldn't think that these movies would be made, like, especially at the time that these books came out, right? And when, the decades that would precede them, you wouldn't expect it to be made to that level until at this point, right? Because obviously there was some animated versions of these things, and, that was fun and all, but it wasn't to the level of what these movies did. And honestly, ever since, I can't really think of too many adaptations that have like hit the nail on the head so heavily. Obviously there's differences between both material, but at the same time, like, what you were just describing, growing up with something like that and seeing it kind of unravel, years down the road. Like, it has to be an emotional experience. Just has to be.
Just decades of wondering what it might look like. And yeah, those films, the Lord of the Rings, my father-in-law bought it for me, the first film, and I had never heard of the books. I'm not into dragons and trolls and wizards. I'm not into that at all. I have zero interest. And he bought me that first film on DVD, and I just left it in the plastic, and it sat on my shelf forever. And it wasn't until the second movie came out. So you're talking months later, the second movie's out in theater. And I was like, man, he's going to ask me if I watch that. And he spent the money on it. Like I owe him that to at least watch it. And so I had nothing to do one Saturday, and I threw it in, and it instantly became one of my all-time favorite films. I saw both of the next two in theaters twice. I have the same ones. I have the Blu-ray extendeds. I have the 4K extendeds. I love them. I cry in all three of those films. The friendship, the relationship with Frodo and Samwise is like one of the most beautiful things, and what they say to one another. And I weep in all three of those films. So I guess I am into dragons and wizards now, but just from association, right?
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up Merry and Pippin, Frodo and Sam, because my best friend and I are more like Merry and Pippin.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my best friend, he's up in Canada now. He's getting his doctorate up there. But when we're around each other, I'm more like Merry. I'm a little bit more serious, and he's more silly, but together we're very silly. And that's just that's all we ever want to do is just silly things. And so, and kind of get into trouble too. We don't steal fireworks though.
Oh, that's good.
So Gandalf can't catch us.
That's awesome, dude. So what 5 films have had the greatest impact on you? Emotionally, worldview, your life perspective?
So like I was saying, I was kind of bleeding into this, so I think this will be a quick talk about, but like just talking about all 3 of these right here. Like I said earlier, my best friend is also a big fan of these films, these Lord of the Rings films, and has just constantly been in my life. And pretty much anytime I have a conversation, actually I teach, and I realized the years, like I've been teaching for about 6 years now, and that is not very much time to have been teaching, but at the same time, I ask this question usually every single semester, because I do this as a roll call question. I'm like, what's your favorite movie? And then if I say your name, say that you're here and tell me your favorite movie. Over the years, the response of Lord of the Rings is dwindled so much because it just people. I mean, obviously, the first one came out 20 years ago this year, which is just insane to think about. Yeah, I don't know. I'm becoming an old man when it comes to people not talking about these movies with my students, because all my students are roughly around 17, 18 years old. They're all college freshmen, and so they weren't even born when these movies came out, or like they were just born when the last one came out. So having to have that knowledge in my mind, and me being frustrated that they're like, it's like, yeah, I haven't seen those. Like, they're too long. I'm like, you don't understand. I'm like, attention spans have also changed over the last 10 years because of social media. So I can kind of get that. And also people like what they like. They like other things too. Like I would assume like the Marvel films are that equivalent to a lot of people, and I love those too. Yeah, I don't know. So Lord of the Rings, that is a question I ask a lot to my students. It's also any type of relationship I want to have with anybody, friendship or otherwise. This comes up a lot, and I'm also like, yes, if you're going to be around me, you're going to see me quoting these movies quite often, and you're going to see decor around my house that are Lord of the Rings based, and it's just yeah. Like you were saying earlier, there's so much packed into these movies. It literally is almost every single genre mixed into one thing. It's an adventure film. It has comedy. It has romance. It has horror. Maybe like the stretch is sci-fi, but it's they're all there: fantasy, action, thriller, mystery. It's like all right here, and I don't know, I just love it. And yeah, these are movies that I'll just cherish the rest of my life, or I'll say they're precious.
Well done.
So yeah, I know, long-winded on that one again. Crosses over. The second one, though, has had a really great impact on me, and ever since I watched it, for the first time I watched this movie, I remember watching it and not really having much of an effect on it, but I remember watching it a few years down the road when I watched it, and now it's been a staple of my viewing every October. And I'm talking about Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth. And this is the 4K. I have the Criterion somewhere over there, and like I have a few editions of this because it's just one of those films that I really, really love. I actually have the poster right over there, which you can't see. But this was the first film that I watched that was, a foreign language film for me, right? Because, from the U.S. So this is the first time I would ever have to read subtitles and, fall in love with a story that, I not necessarily can understand just from historical, because this is talking about Franco and the Spanish Civil War that's going on in the 40s, around the same time World War II is happening. So there's that historical context, but also just going to this magical world, kind of very much like the other films that I've talked about, like Lord of the Rings, where it has this fantastical element to it. So it really connected with me in that sense. But this was a much darker, like it's historical mixed in with the fantasy, and having that kind of those worlds collide, and seeing our main character, Ophelia, who is trying to escape the realities of what's going on in the world. And, is she seeing this, or is this a real thing? It's just one of those films that it opened the doors for me to international cinema, and has forever been a mainstay. It's one of the first films that I cried in, and has just stuck with me because it's still an emotional movie to me. And I just recently watched it at a local theater here in town because they were showing it, and I hadn't seen it on the big screen, so I was very happy to have watched it on the big screen. And I teared up like I do every time I watch this movie. And so, have you seen Pan's Labyrinth?
I have, but I'm writing it down because it was like when it came out, I watched it, so
Right.
I need to revisit that.
Yeah, it's like 15 years old now.
15. Oh wow.
Yeah, but big impact on my life.
Yeah, I need to revisit that one. All right.
The other movie poster that's like literally right next to it is I'm just going through my movie posters, honestly. These are the biggest films that have had impact on my life. But the next one is one that I've championed ever since I started this channel. I think it was my second video that I brought up. But I'm talking about In Bruges right here. And I've talked about this movie. Besides Lord of the Rings, this is my favorite movie of all time. And this is a little Irish film with Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson, and Ray Fiennes. And good God, it's just it is me in my youth, like just my viewing experiences and like just kind of my humor, all mixed into one. And it also has I have a hard time selling this movie because there's so much to this movie. But it's at its heart, it is a black comedy that also has repercussions with with purgatory. That's like kind of the backdrop of this film. There's these two henchmen. There's a botched job that happens, and they have to hide out in this Belgium town called Bruges, which is this medieval town, and more or less just hide out until things kind of settle because of this accident that happens. And more or less, one of them is just like kind of enjoying the sights, just kind of like, hey, this is going to be a vacation, whatever. And then the person who botched the job is just depressed and just doesn't want to be there, and wants to find any excuse to leave this situation, and just kind of put himself in spots where he can just feel alive again. And that's some serious stuff. But like I said, it's very comedic, but it's also dark comedy. So I don't know if you're not akin to that kind of stuff. It's definitely the best way I would describe it is very Irish. And so if you're familiar with Irish humor, I feel like you might like it. And if you like that kind of stuff, I think it's an incredible journey. And the movie is just a movie I've seen countless times. And I watched it back when I worked at a record store. And that's one of the first films that I got recommended from a coworker of mine. And I was asking for movie recommendations because I was just trying to explore, like I was exploring Christopher Nolan, David Fincher, a lot of those 90s and the 2000s kind of darker films. I was trying to just poking my head around trying to, watch more movies, and more movies than what the popcorn films that were coming out. I wanted to get a little bit deeper, and In Bruges was one of the first movies that was recommended to me, and it absolutely stuck with me. And now I have shown this to, I want to say 13 or 14 people, and I would say 12 of them like it. Wow. And so the other twos are like the black comedy wasn't for them. So which I can totally understand, but this fits my humor to a T. It also fits maybe my worldview, my philosophy on a lot of stuff, and just kind of seeing humanity within these flawed characters. And it's something where I get a lot of empathy for people, and in general, like I try to understand people's situations, and I try to understand if there's any flaws within their actions. That obviously people get second chances, and people can work through these things. Obviously, this is about a botched hit job, so I'm not around any of those people. But it's still, I can see the good in everybody, and that's kind of where I kind of align that with this movie. And so I recommend In Bruges if you haven't. This is the second sight release, which is a UK release, so this is region B, but the normal Blu-ray is out there. It's very cheap. I would certainly go get it and recommend it. It's been on Netflix a few times, and yeah, it's an incredible film.
I put it on my list. I have seen it before, but it's another one just like Pan's Labyrinth where it's been forever. And Cinema Dave, one of the things I always appreciate, he says it, I've heard him say it a number of times, is because I'm pretty quick to see a film, I don't like it, I get rid of it out of the collection. But he talks about, I know he said, like, if you wait like a couple years down the road, it might hit you completely differently.
Oh yeah.
And those are two films that I hear people talk about a lot, that I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen it. And it didn't necessarily do anything for me then, but I'm like, you know what? It's been so long. They're films I have to revisit,
Oh yeah. I mean, for me, The Social Network that came out in like 2010, first time I watched that movie, I hated it. And I'm like, I just didn't get it, didn't want to get it. And then I think I approached it a few years ago for for a rewatch. And I was like, wow, this is a lot better than I remembered. And I can completely understand why people talk about this movie. So not necessarily saying it's my favorite, but I was glad I revisited because of the spot where I was in my life.
Yeah.
So,
I got them on the list. I got to revisit those.
Next, kind of going off of In Bruges a little bit. This is a lot more silly. This is actually more slapstick, which I'm a huge fan of. Absolute just lunacy. This is a classic film from 1975, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I love British humor, and goes back to like my love of just Irish humor too. So, nearby, but not the same. But I do love nonsensical, just, slapstick things. I've loved Charlie Chaplin, the Marx Brothers, Three Stooges I grew up on, even Red Skeleton a little bit. So like I watched that as a kid, Looney Tunes and whatnot. And then watching this movie for the first time, I had not watched The Flying Circus, and I hadn't seen Life of Brian or The Meaning of Life. I watched it after the fact. But the first time I watched this, my best friend, my neighbor, was saying like, hey, we should watch this because, we're big Lord of the Rings fans. We're big, I think King Arthur with like Clive Owen was happening. Gladiator had just came out not that long. Like it was around that time period. So like a bunch of big action sword and sandals movies were coming out. I'm like, yeah, I like knights and swords and stuff. So like, let's watch this really ridiculous comedy here. And man, oh man, I know everyone who is watching this right now, who has seen this, understands how silly this movie is. And it has just colored my my world. Once again, I mentioned with Lord of the Rings, there's knickknacks around my house that are Lord of the Rings based. There's even knickknacks for Monty Python and the Holy Grail around my house. And fun story, my voicemail from 10 years ago is a Monty Python quote, and is still my voicemail. And so anyone who calls me will hear, "Hi, you've reached Nathan. I'm not here right now, but if you can, please answer these 3 questions first. Tell me first your name, second your quest, and third your favorite color." And then I just like beep. And so sometimes when I hear a voicemail, I hear like, "Hey, my name is blah blah blah. Like I'm here to dentist appointment or whatever." And it's like my favorite color is green. I'm like, who said that? Why is saying my favorite? Oh, I'm like, oh right, that's my voicemail, and I haven't changed it.
That's good. That's great, man.
Yeah.
Which has got to be funny when you create that at a young age, and when you're an adult and you're more professional, you're like, oh gee.
God. No, that reminds me. When I got my first teaching job, that reminds me, the department head of the university that I went to, he called, and I missed it because I was in the middle of work at the coffee shop that I was working at the time. And he left a voicemail, and I was expecting his call. I didn't expect it that late, though. And so I remember hearing the voicemail, and then like almost the first few words out of his mouth were like, "What an interesting voicemail." And I'm just like, uh-oh. Like, I really hope that this didn't cut my chances of getting this job. And then I called him back, and I explained, it was like, I just really love Monty Python. And he's like, you got the job. It's fine.
That's
hilarious. It's like, I'm not changing this though. But yeah, if there's any kind of business related things, I do sweat a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah.
I remember when I first got a cell phone, you could like record your voice to like it be, or like ring your ringing. So instead of a ring, it would be whatever message you put on there. So friends and I were just doing stupid stuff with our cell phones. So I screamed into my phone. My phone is ringing. My phone is ringing. And anyway, I don't know how long ago it was after that, but I was in FYE. It was crowded. It's in my pocket. I'm looking at stuff with my hands, and I'd left my phone on. And out of my pocket, it just started screaming, "My phone is ringing, my phone is ringing." And everybody's looking at me, and I'm like, I'm an adult. And I'm just like, what an idiot. Like, anyway, I quickly changed it, and just in case.
Well, at least I don't have my phone ever off of vibrate or off, or the sound. So I have no clue what my ringtone is anymore. But it's probably better that way though for for me. Yeah. And I guess the last thing I'll talk about is more movie posters behind me. Actually, this time I have the Before trilogy. If everyone sees behind me, I have the Criterion here. And I was really, really late to these films. This release came out a few years ago from the Criterion collection. But these were, once again, I'm thinking back at the record store that I worked at. That same person and other coworkers told me a lot about this trilogy. They're like, yeah, like you should watch this stuff. And I wasn't super keen on romance at the time. I'll talk about a film in a little bit later on. That was the only film I had any kind of relationship to romance that I liked. So I wasn't super aware. And so I started, just was curious, and I'm like, I'm going to watch all of the what people are saying to watch. Like I would watch Say Anything and 10 Things I Hate About You, and Sleepless in Seattle, and I watch all these different romances from different time periods. But once I got to this trilogy right here, Before Sunrise, which came out in 1995, right over there on the right, Before Sunset, which came out in 2004, which is right above me, and Before Midnight, which is 2013, were all 9 years apart. And I came to these after the fact, obviously, but these movies were literally set 9 years apart in their plot. and they were following these two characters, Julie Delphi and Ethan Hawke, on their relationship journey. And from like the first time they met, when they met up again in the middle, and then when they were in a relationship a little bit down the road. And man, these movies are, I mean, some of my favorite movies of all time are all dialogue driven. So I love like 12 Angry Men. There's another film I'll talk about in a bit that's very dialogue heavy, and it feels like a play. In Bruges is very dialogue heavy, and so is Before Sunrise and Before Sunset and Before Midnight. And Richard Linklater, I love his stuff ever since. I think Dazed and Confused was the first thing I watched from him, but I have just fallen in love with all the things that he's done, but in particular this trilogy. And it really just kind of woke my eyes up to romance films, and like I'm a romantic myself, and so for better or for worse. And these movies are definitely, once again, the people I've shown this to who are maybe open for it, or these movies, you get a lot out of it. And I would just highly recommend these films if you haven't seen it and you're in the mood for love, if you will, right? Or just the hardship of relationships too, because it literally runs the entire gamut of how hard relationships can be. So it's all of that stuff and more. Great stuff.
Cool.
Yep, those 5.
Nice. Those are 3 that I have not seen yet. They're on my radar, but have not got around to yet.
I think you would love them.
Yeah, I do need to see them. I love, and the idea of that 9-year gap thing is brilliant. And yeah, I got to see it. What 5 films? Number 4. What 5 films do you consider to be underrated films?
Yeah, this one was hard because I was just going through my alphabet. I have an app on my phone that I categorize my movies. I catalog them. And so I was going through it A to Z, like just trying like, which films should I point out and stuff. And so I try to find some ones that maybe people have heard about and some that people haven't really. The first movie that I'll talk about is one I haven't seen in a second, but is one that's still very much in my mind. And I'm talking about Jerome Bixby's Man from Earth right here. And this is like a TV movie that has just such an incredible, interesting plot. It's very much like the Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, 12 Angry Men. It's just all dialogue driven, really. And it feels like a play. And it has, what's his name from True Blood, John Billingsley, who plays Bill off of True Blood, if anyone is familiar with that show. So that is one of our main characters here. But this is a science fiction film, and it is about a guy I'll just read it real quick. It's better to say that. And on a cold night in a remote cabin, Professor John Oldman gathers his most trusted colleagues for an extraordinary announcement. He is an immortal who has migrated through 140 centuries of evolution and must now move on. And so is he truly a Cro-Magnon, or is he insane? And so the people, his colleagues, are in all these different departments, and they all ask him. One's a biologist, one's a historian, one's an anthropology. They're all asking him questions that they know this stuff really, really well, and he's just answering them in ways that are really kind of shocking them. And they're kind of like, obviously, when you first hear that, you're like, this is insane. What are you talking about? And so he just kind of unravels as the story goes on, as that they're just in this one location, like I said, just asking these questions and talking to him about it. And it's just super compelling. And it's just one of those weird premises that just sticks with you. And you're just going to like sit there and like, this is a TV movie. And like, it's just so much fun and entertaining. And it's just like the premise alone is like glues you to the seat. And so, yeah, I recommend this one if anyone hasn't seen it. It's The Man from Earth.
Cool. I put it on my list.
Next is a movie that I hope one day that the Criterion Collection puts out on disc. But it is a movie that I absolutely love. I actually have the vinyl soundtrack of this because it's done by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, and I'm a Nick Cave fan. So. But I'm talking about The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. And this year of movies, this is the same year that There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men came out. So this was a like Western year, and kind of a revival of these more modern Westerns. But The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, which is the last time I'll say that whole thing, is just an incredible film with Brad Pitt and Casey Affleck at the helm. Brad Pitt's playing Jesse James, and Robert Ford is one of his henchmen. This is the latter part of Jesse James's life. And it's just a super slow burn film that is drenched in kind of the backdrop of where they're at and just aging and kind of figuring out like the glory days of like where's the legend of Jesse James and like where's the reality, and who is he trusting anybody around him? Is he kind of going a little bit insane just based on all the things that he's done in his past? And it's just a very moving film, and it's got a cool narration. Can't remember who narrates it, but it's an incredible film, and it'll wash over you if you have the time and like a little bit of patience. Like, it is a worthwhile watch, and like I said, the soundtrack itself is one that the score, I guess, is just one that like sticks with me, and like I have that sometimes playing on if I'm just waiting somewhere. Like sometimes that music starts playing in my mind. I'm like, oh goodness gracious, like I'm in this weird spot where I'm like thinking I'm in the wild west or something, and this music just kind of sits there and has like a lazy kind of quality to it of just like meandering through a time. And this is an underrated film because I don't hear it talked about too often, but it's an incredible one. You seen it?
I have. I put it on my list because as soon as you held it up, I was like, I love that film, and I don't have that in my collection, and I don't know why. So
it's so good.
I put it on my list to go buy it now.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I can't gush about that movie enough. I watched that.
Casey Affleck, I really like.
As do I.
Yeah, I really am a big fan. When you mentioned Ghost Story, I really, really like him. I find him really compelling to watch. There's one, I forget the name of it. It's also a slow burn. It's with his daughter. Have you seen?
Oh, you're talking about Manchester by the Sea.
No, this one, I know that one. It's in a post-apocalyptic world where all of the females, or almost all the females, are gone, are dead. And he has a little girl, but to protect her, they cut her hair and make her look like a boy. And he's trying to travel through this post-apocalyptic world with her.
Shoot, is that came out a couple years ago?
Yeah.
I know you're talking about, but the name's escaping me.
And that one was another one where I'm just like, it's a slow burn film, like Ghost Story, but I just find him so compelling that I could just keep watching.
Well, it isn't The Road, because that's Viggo Mortensen.
And another one of his I want to see, I haven't seen it yet, is Our Friend. Let me see here. Light of My Life.
Light of My Life. Okay, I haven't seen that.
Man, I highly, highly recommend that film.
I'm definitely gonna check that one out because I like I said, I'm a Casey Affleck fan myself. So
so good.
I mentioned this earlier with dialogue, and so I will bring this movie up too. And this is actually one of more recent films. Well, not too recent. 2011. It's 10 years old now, but it's a film by Roman Polanski, who has a checkered past, of course, but he's not in the States anymore. But he did make a adaptation of a play called Carnage that I really, really love. This has Jodie Foster, Kate Winslet, Christoph Waltz, and John C. Reilly in it, and which is a stacked cast. But it really is, it's all centered around this apartment and the sons of these two couples, right? They get in this altercation, and it's more or less like, well, okay, how are we gonna like we have to go, apologize to these kids' parents, and then like, are we going to figure out some kind of punishment system? But it just kind of breaks away into something completely different, into this really insane kind of, story where they're all just in this apartment and discussing these different things and just kind of going all over the place. And it's just one of those films that is almost like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, mixed in with, something from like John Cassavetes, or it's just like this weird combination, a little bit more modern than those films that I just mentioned, but it's just so much fun, and also like hard to watch because the conversations that they have are very real. And as parents, I'm not a parent myself, so I'm sure this will have a different meaning to me when if I ever become one. But Carnage is just an incredible film, and I recommend it. A lot of people don't talk about it too much, so yeah, this is one of them. One of the ones I would recommend as underrated.
All right, it's on my list.
Next is a movie that I actually watched in the summer for the first time, and I was just blown away by it because it was for one of my friends, and it was his birthday, and he was doing a movie marathon, and this was the last movie that he played in it, and this came out in 1997, and it goes by a name that a lot of other people associate with a different film. I'm talking about Drive. And I'm not talking about the Ryan Gosling Drive, which is also incredible, but this is the 1997 action buddy cop film Drive, with Mark DeCostas in it, and Kadeem Hardison, and then also Brittany Murphy, the late Brittany Murphy. She's in this as well. And this is right before Rush Hour came out. In 1998, I think, is when Rush Hour came out. But this is a better Rush Hour. It is a lot more gritty. I feel like it has a bigger budget than I would think a movie like this is, one that I had not really had heard of. But it is just so much fun. The dialogue is just insane. It reminds me of Lethal Weapon, and all those other buddy cop films that I like to watch. The next film that I'm going to talk about is a buddy cop movie as well, actually. Just that dynamic of these two characters and their backgrounds and where they're from, and kind of just together in this situation that they don't want to be in, but they find through this weird these weird gunfights and stuff that they're gonna have to stick with each other to get out alive. And this is just one of the most mind-blowing films that just really, like I said, took me by surprise, because I was just expecting a kind of a typical action film here. It is much better than that. And this is actually out on MVD, which I think is a boutique label. This isn't the only one that I have from them. I think there are a few other movies, but it is a little bit expensive. I think I spent around $20-ish, a little bit more than that. But if you have a holiday or birthday coming up, or save up a little bit, I would certainly recommend this one. It's a blind buy that I think you would not. You are a fan of action films, you're going to have a really fun time with this one, even if you hadn't heard of it or seen it before, because it's a good blind buy.
Cool. Yeah, I've never heard of it before.
Yeah, it's so much fun. Nice. And I had to buy it immediately after I watched it with my friends. Yeah. Next, and the last film I'll mention is another buddy cop film. This is actually made by the brother of Martin McDonagh, who did In Bruges, who I didn't say. I don't think I said Martin McDonagh did that, but John Michael McDonagh, who is another Irish filmmaker, made a film called The Guard right here. This came out in 2011. It's got Don Cheadle in it, and Brendan Gleeson, who was in Bruges. And it is an Irish film. It's an Irish film about a cop where there's some killings happen, and then an American, Don Cheadle, comes in to help investigate it. Once again, it's a dark comedy. It's a black comedy. And with that being said, it's very Irish. And so there's going to be some humor in here that are probably, it's a little dated now, but if you're just set in this world and understand the premise of it, like, it's funny. And it's fun in the sense where they're at, but not saying that the kind of behaviors that they have in this fictional world are okay, because they're not. But it is definitely a fun film nonetheless. And another buddy cop film. I'm a huge fan of those types of films, and just to kind of see this weird friendship develop from these weird circumstances. And The Guard is a really great movie that isn't really talked about as much, I don't think. So I think this is an underrated one as well.
Nice. Cool. I'm getting a lot of films on this list that I'm going to be needing to find to get to watch. And the last question is, what 5 films bring you the most joy, hope, laughter? They put a smile on your face.
Yeah, so I'll start off with my first one that I go to a lot that kind of became, I think at the time I watched this for the first time I watched this movie was I was in a lot of transition years. Kind of, I think I was going between undergraduate school and graduate school, so I was kind of at a crossroads. And so, and I watched this movie. The film's plot I don't really connect to as much, just kind of the situations that some of these people come themselves in. But I'm talking about the way back right here. And the way back has an amazing cast here. Our main kind of character is Sam Rockwell, who is helping this boy right here. And I'm trying to think. Liam James is our main character right here. It's him and his relationship with Sam Rockwell, who just owns this water park. But Liam James is there for the summer. His mom, Toni Collette, and his stepfather, Steve Carell, are there as well. And they're vacationing at this summer beach. Steve Carell is, barely in his relationship with Toni Collette, and you can tell that they don't get along. Steve Carell does not get along with the step kids, I guess, and he can sense that he misses his dad. He wants to hang out with his actual dad, and so he's having to stay the whole summer here at this really really awesome beachfront area. But at the same time, he's just like, I don't want to be here. Like, I'd rather be hanging out with my dad. And more or less, he just discovers this water park, and Sam Rockwell, who's more or less just a big old child who runs this thing, and is really he's got a lot of great people around him, who Maya Rudolph, Maya Rudolph, who is a comedian, and she's fantastic. It was like one of the only people who really cares for him, which he doesn't really see, and just props him up, helps him out, run this park. And Liam James's character goes to this park, and then he more or less sees this weird surrogate kind of father-like character in Sam Rockwell, even though he's a big kid, and so they're able to develop this relationship. And over the course of a summer, kind of secretly, away from his family, and it's just one of those heartfelt movies that I put on all the time when I'm down. It's one of those films you know what, I'm going to put this on because I want to feel happy. And The Way Back has some hard moments, but at the same time, it always brings a smile to my face with the cast and crew, and kind of just this kind of getaway movie for me.
I love that film. I found it to be pretty emotional, in a positive way.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I was not expecting that when I think I originally found it at a Dollar Tree. And I was like, oh, Steve Carell's in it, Maya Rudolph's in it, Sam Rockwell, it's got to be decent. And I loved it. It was, my wife and I laughed our heads off, and it was also just really touching, the whole film.
Yeah. I think that's when it's weird, because sometimes I talk to people and I say that's one of my comfort films. That's such an emotional movie. It's yeah, but not in the way you would expect it to be.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to describe it.
Totally.
Next is a movie that came out. I had watched some of this director's previous works beforehand growing up, but it never really stuck with me. And I remember I was at my apartment with my roommates at the time, and one of them had an HBO account at the time. And I remember this had just came out on streaming service. And so I'm like, you know what, I'll watch it. And I'm talking about Wes Anderson's Grand Budapest Hotel. And like I said, I had watched a few of his movies beforehand. I watched Moonrise Kingdom, which I think came right before this one. And I also had seen The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou as when I was younger, which I totally didn't get as a teenager because I wasn't just in that mood. But when I watched this movie, it all clicked with me, and it all became such a fantastical, fun film with almost Monty Python-like kind of skits, but in a very neat way, because everyone who watches a Wes Anderson film knows that Wes Anderson is very particular and very peculiar with the way he sets up things, with his shots, his costumes, his designs, his dialogue. All of it is very unique. And ever since then, I've watched I think all of Wes Anderson's films I've seen now, and I enjoyed them all to varying degrees. But this is the one that woke me up to it, and but it always brings a big smile to my face every time I watch it, because there are just so many moments that it's weird because like these are unforgettable moments, but every time I experience it, I still like crack up, because it's almost like I watched it for the first time. And it's just some of these things I'm just like, how in the world did he get that performance out of that actor? Because once again, people who are aware of Wes Anderson films, his films have such a stacked cast. They're just the most insane amount of people, and they just keep recurring in all of his movies, where it's just so much fun. So you seen this one?
I haven't.
You'd love it. It's such a silly movie. This is the Criterion edition, but the normal edition is good enough for people. But like this is just a lot of fun. There's the Budapest Hotel itself, and if you're into weirder, peculiar comedies, I would recommend Wes Anderson's work. So
I have to confess, and I maybe got kicked out of the film community for this, I've never seen a Wes Anderson film.
Oh, you won't get kicked out.
I just saw Jaws last month, so I'm safe. I'm finally in at least that club. So,
was the music playing? I honestly, I would recommend that one.
Cool.
For like your first Wes Anderson movie. Yeah,
right.
That's the one that hooked me, and I think that's like maybe the pinnacle of all the things that came before it. So. All right. So the next one I have here is the movie that I didn't expect to love so much. It's one of those movies that I think some people were just always talking about it, the first one and the second one that came out recently after it. But once I watched it, I'm like, good God, this is the most wholesome thing I've ever seen in my life. And I can't stop watching them every year. I'm talking about Paddington 2. So the Paddington movies, the first and the second Paddington movies, are just, like I said, it's wholesome. It's so joyful. It's so, like, I grew up on Winnie the Pooh. I didn't really grow up with Paddington Bear, but like I remember Corduroy Bear as well. That was a book that I read, and those types of stories. But nonetheless, like, I don't know who makes these movies, or like the whole universe itself, but like when this came out and I finally watched, because I watched, I think, Paddington really quick before I watched the second one, and they were both on disc, so I think it was like a couple years ago, maybe in 2018 when I watched them for the first time. And ever since then, it just like it clicked with me, and I'm very, very excited for the third one. And these are movies that I like would love to put on anytime, anywhere, any moment. I'm like, this is a movie that I can watch over and over again. Also has Brendan Gleeson in this one. Yeah. Brendan Gleeson is a huge person in my life that I really, really love. So one of my favorite actors. And so Paddington 2, go see it. Everybody go see this movie.
I have seen them both with my daughter. The first one, the scene where he's in the bathroom and he's cleaning his ears out with the toothbrushes, sticks in his mouth, the whole toilet.
Yeah.
She just loses it. We both like lose it during that scene, just laughing. They are really good, really wholesome.
Yeah, and stuff like that, and even more recently, the Christopher Robin movie as well. That one hit. That one's a little bit more emotional than these. This is more lively and more fun.
Yeah.
But those movies, like, they hit, and they hit, like, they're fun, and they're movies that just, like, honestly, I want a marmalade sandwich right now. We're talking about this. The next is a movie I previously mentioned, a romance movie that one has stuck with me for my entire life. But this is like, romance is a small part of it. I mean, it's a big part of this movie. Actually, it's the main focus of the movie. But there's so many other genres it touches. And this is a classic from 1987, which is my favorite year of films. I'm talking about The Princess Bride. And yeah, there's this movie. I don't know. I don't know where I was when I first watched it. Probably school. I was probably in school when I watched this for the first time. Probably in English class or something. I didn't read the book until a year and a half ago for the first time. but good God, this movie is perfect. And it has literally everything that I want in it. Like I said, with all those different genres of films, but romance being at the heart of the movie itself. It's just a kid in his bed, like, sick, and his grandfather coming to read him a story. And that story just has a bunch of different characters in it. It's a romance at itself, but it's action and adventure. It's got a lot of comedy roles. Andre the Giant, the only, I think, movie credit that he's had. I was a huge wrestling fan growing up, so I was a fan of Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan. After the fact, obviously, I watched it late, his rewind films, because I wasn't around in the '80s. So, but I definitely watched those matches and those iconic moments. And so seeing him in a film like this was just so much fun. And you could tell, I know he was hurting at the time because his back was not really working properly because of how big he is. But I can just tell how much fun he had with this movie. And it really shows. Wallace Shawn is incredible in it as well. Carrie Ells, everybody in this movie is just delightful, and I love it. And it's still, it's definitely, whenever I have kids, is going to be one of the first movies that I show them when they're like 5 or 6, probably years old. I'm like, this is definitely a movie we're going to watch over and over again. Won't get tired of it.
Well, your comment and how you said I wasn't around in the 80s, that does make me feel a little bit old now.
Well, my mind's there though.
The time that I felt the oldest was, I was talking, there was this high school student, and we ended up in a conversation about guitar. And I was telling him, he was like, what bands are you into? And because I play guitar and played in bands and stuff. And so I was like, oh man, because for me, I started middle school in 1990, graduated college in 2000. So the decade of the 90s for me is my most formative years for music and movies. And I was listing the bands I was into, and I was like, and Nirvana. And he's like, oh dude, Nirvana, classic rock. And I was like, what are you talking about? It is not classic rock.
I don't consider it classic rock.
No. So anyway, moments where I feel older, but
yeah. That's a whole nother conversation, because for me, I know classic rock's ever evolving or whatever, but I guess I think there's like a 20-year rule or something along those lines.
Really?
I think that's how they define it. But to me, classic rock is late 60s
yes, to
the late 80s. And that is classic rock. Yeah. And when I say 80s, like, well, obviously there's hair metal and the rock, those hard rock bands, but like the stadium bands too. But for me, like Nirvana, I'm like, no, that's a grunge band.
Yes.
So and yes, it is older, but grunge is his own thing. So I don't know. But anyway, dissecting into that. The last film that I have is one of the dumbest films that I'll recommend. It's not good at all. It's very bad. It's on the same level, but like knock it down a lot more than Monty Python. And this is a DVD copy because they have not released. They have not had the cojones to release this on Blu-ray for some reason. But I'm talking about Kung Pao, Enter the Fist, with Mr. Odenkirk himself, Steve Odenkirk. This movie is very dumb, and it is from 2002. But when I watched this for the first time, this is the first one of the first movies that made me pee my pants. Like literally, just because it's just so outrageous. If anyone hasn't seen this movie, it is dubbed over an original movie. I'm trying to think of what is it dubbed after the original? It doesn't even say on the back what the original movie that they're putting all these characters and sound effects over, but it is an actual Hong Kong film that exists. And they're dubbing and putting his character as the chosen one, the main character, in this film, using terrible CGI with a combination of just overdubbing every single line to make it very nonsensical. It is a ludicrous film, and but it is one of them that I just watched this. I had those same friends that I watched Drive with. I had my birthday back in May, and I'm like, I'm gonna do this. We're gonna watch this movie after I think we watched The Princess Bride first, but then I'm like, we're also gonna watch Kung Pao, and only one of my friends had seen it besides me, and I'm like, and him and I like love this movie. It's so stupid but we grew up with it, and we wanted to watch what everyone else thought, and they hated it so much. Like, because they didn't watch it when they were like a kid, and so like, of course, it's like this is just so awful. But I have such nostalgia for this movie that it brings me a lot of joy, because it is literally just the silliest thing. So I wouldn't say I would recommend it but if you are in the mindset, or if you have like teenagers, they might like this, and that's what I would say is they should watch that. Bad taste, bad movie.
This is the thing. So when I started watching your content, so this is a perfect example of why I like your channel. I watched tons of your content, and I'm like, man, this dude's like super serious, and like he's into like all of these foreign films and these older films, and like it's just like, to me, like more like highbrow cinema and all this stuff. But every once in a while, you pull out something like that, and we're like, no, I could hang out with this guy for sure.
I may talk about serious stuff, but at the heart and the center of me, I am a very silly person, and I love silly things. And it's weird for me, because I think with my whole just journey with movies in general, like I started off with a lot of those things, and I'm naturally curious, and so I've gotten to the point where I am at now, where I'm just talking about maybe the things that I've never seen or heard about. And so that's an unintended consequence of that, and I don't try to bring that up. But I do need to think a little bit more about like bringing in some of those movies that like were formative with me, and ones that are like just super fun that everyone else enjoys, and like to talk about those too, because I do need to start thinking about that.
But when you went through the last room tour you did, I also saw like a lot of your films. Was like, oh yeah, this guy. We watched a lot of the same stuff. But I do like that about your channel, because I've learned so much about films that I had never heard about. And so yeah, I just love the content you're constantly putting out. And it does make that film. I've never seen that film, but it totally catches me off guard when I see you pull something like that, because I'm just so used to seeing these in-depth stuff I've never heard of, and then you drop that.
Well, I could have brought over Billy Madison or something like that, and I would have also had a lot of fun with that, because like I still quote that movie to this day. And anytime August is approaching, and I tell people like school's coming back, and then I start singing "Back to School," and then I start thinking, silly Adam Sandler from the '90s, and so I'm all over the place.
I just rewatched that film last week, 2 weeks ago. I rewatched that film.
I love it. It's dumb, but I love it.
It's not in my collection, and I was at a Goodwill, and it was factory sealed on DVD, unfortunately. But I grabbed it. I was like, I have to. And it actually ended up being, it was the night before we found out about Norm Macdonald passing away. And
God, I hated that.
I know, because he's like,
I love Norm.
He's a genius, and I
love
his how his brain works. I love his delivery, everything. And so yeah, I ended up seeing that night before, which his part in that movie is
it's in the very beginning. He's in the pool.
So so anyway, that is a great one. My
R.I.P. Norm.
I know. I think I've watched a few hours of YouTube stuff of his since his passing, but
there's nobody like him. There's nobody that ever is going to be like him. I mean, his delivery and the types of things that he says, like I aspire to that when I teach. Like I aspire some of those deadpan jokes that I try my best. But sometimes it works. Most of the time it doesn't. But I can only just appreciate that guy and the things that he brought out. Because I mean, he's one of those people that I don't think is for everybody. Because depending on the type of comedy that you like, it's like he could just be an old man dad, like saying these dad jokes. Is like, but like to me, I'm like, that's brilliant. I love it.
I was watching some people deconstruct his humor this last week, and and I think they nailed it. A lot of the time, it was never about the joke. The joke was the situation he created and put you in, and is making you feel. It wasn't about what he was saying, and he knew it, and he was thoroughly thrilled with your reaction to the situation he just put you in.
Uh-huh.
And again, it's brilliant stuff. He was just working on a different level than what you were expecting.
And I always loved like watching like those old Conan where he just would be like, and then he would finish what he was saying, and then Conan's like, so that was it? That's the joke? And so he's like, yeah, that's all I had to say about that. And so I'm just like cracking up, just like, but there's nothing like him. So yeah.
Andy Richter, one of the ones I was watching, Norm got finished telling a joke, which took like 7 minutes,
which also is great.
Good. Yeah,
his story.
And Andy said, Norm, your jokes are like saying, hey, come follow me for a second. And then you take someone on a 2-mile walk and you go, hey, look, there's a pile of dog crap.
But I love it because he's just he puts so much effort into all that. I mean, like that just speaks to me because I'm always like, just stick with bits.
Yeah.
Just stick to the bits. You'll come across as like, oh, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's like, I love it.
It's so good, man. So good. Well, Nathan, this was awesome, man. I appreciate you taking all this time. I know you're getting this movie room together, but I really do appreciate it, man. I've been looking forward to this. I know you through your channel and through Stephanie, because Stephanie speaks so highly of you. And I've got to talk to her a couple times. And so to get to actually have a conversation with you, man, I really do appreciate it, and have enjoyed this. And I have a long list of films I need to watch and potentially add to the collection.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you, and big shout out to Steph, who's a great friend of both of ours. I mean, she's been one of my best friends on the platform and also in real life for quite some time now. And so I'm glad that she is in both of our corners, but also just out there for everybody who's watching. If you haven't checked out Movie Chatter, her content's incredible, and she's a great person too. So big shout out to her. But yeah, I want to say thank you because I've been a fan of your channel. I think it was around a year and a half ago or something that I finally ran across your stuff, and I think I even made a video talking about some content creators for people to check out, and that's kind of where I was starting to watch your stuff. I was like, hey, go check out John's channel, and it's just been just a ride since then, and I'm incredibly thankful to be your friend and to be a part of this. And so I want to say thanks for that.
Cool, man. Well, thank you. I really do appreciate it. Is there anything coming up on your channel that you want to just mention that you've got coming up for people to check out? I know you have different series. The film series is back, the Film Journey series, which I'm always watching and enjoying. Is there anything else coming up that you want to mention that you've got that people should check out?
Well, I guess I'm still in the works on some things, but obviously October's right around the corner, so some horror content is coming out, and so trying to figure out what I'll be doing with that. But I have a big watch pile that I want to get through and showcase, but I know everyone who watches or is a fan of just horror movies in general or the season is probably very, very busy with their own stuff that they're doing. So I'm trying to weave in stuff that I'm doing myself, but also lightly recommending other people's stuff, because I know that this month is going to be very jam-packed for everybody. Yeah. And so I don't want to overwhelm people, because I know everyone else has their own stuff that they're doing. They have their own lives. They got their own things they're doing. So for me, it's like I just want to, just to have a little bit of help if you haven't seen this one thing, or you want to go down this road. It's like, hey, check this out or something. But so there's that, and Film Journey. Those are happening. Scheduling them out and trying to get those filmed. 100 Years of Movies. The 80s should be out sometime in the next few weeks. That'll be a lot of fun, and you'll see some familiar faces. Or familiar face, I suppose. Myself too. But yeah, so I'm excited for upcoming content, but always up for something that could change,
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much. I look forward to checking out all those videos. So I'm not a horror guy, and Stephanie gives me the business for that.
Yes, she's much more of a horror person than even me. So
I'm having her do a segment on my channel this month called Horror 101 with Stephanie. And
I love it.
She's going to kind of like lead people like me who are not as much into the genre, kind of walk us through it. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, I'm looking forward to that journey and seeing what you think.
Cool, man. Well, thanks so much, Nathan. I hope you have a great rest of your day, man.
You as well.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Bye. Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I loved having this opportunity to talk to Nathan and getting to know him a little bit better and to learning more about film, which I always learn more about film from him anyway. But to get a chance to talk to him personally was really, really cool. So Nathan, thank you so much for taking the time. I really do appreciate it. Friends, if you want to follow his channel, and I encourage you to check out his channel, again, it'll be in the description below. Please do subscribe to his channel. He has amazing content and you won't regret it. Such a cool guy as well. So anyway, if you enjoyed this episode, friends, please do hit like, hit subscribe if you want more of this kind of content. Episode number 10 is coming up very, very soon. Thank you so much for stopping by. I always appreciate it. Take care of yourself. We'll see you next time.